I thought moving to Canada meant that I'd quickly get a job in my field. I mean, I had experience, education, I was ready, but instead I found myself working at McDonald's. No one told me how hard it would be to land a professional job as a newcomer. Hi there, welcome back to our YouTube channel. My name is Anita Adifie. I am the CEO and founder of Advanced and Fulfilled Coaching Company. We are a company dedicated to helping immigrated professionals and racialized professionals advance their career without all the overwhelm and, quite frankly, establish their identities as well. And today's video, I will be walking you through just the reality check that I found myself in and how hard it was for me to actually get that first job that I was looking for when I moved here 10 years ago. And in the first video, I just told you a little bit about where I am now and what that journey looked like and how I made my decision to stay in Canada. And today I'm going to tell you the hustle that really led me to working in McDonald's. And I will put a disclaimer here. There is nothing wrong with working in McDonald's, but there is something called underemployment. And that is when you're employed at levels that you have way more skill sets, education, and experience for. It's called underemployment. And that was the situation that I found myself in. And like many newcomers, I keep hearing this, or I kept hearing this, that I needed Canadian experience. And then the question is, how do you get the Canadian experience if no one is hiring you? Like, how do you do that, right? And of course, I applied to dozens of jobs in my field. Now, in the first episode, I did mention that I was coming from my dream job, and my dream job was that I was working as my job title really was Foreign Service Officer. And I was working with the Nigerian Minister of Foreign Affairs, which is equivalent to Global Affairs Canada here. And it meant that I was working as a diplomat for the Nigerian government. That's like the easiest way to explain it. But of course, still had some ways to become an ambassador, obviously. However, I was in that field and it was my dream job. I would say that the context for me with my own field is that, like, even if I landed in Canada, like I probably won't, no matter how much qualification I had, I probably won't be hired. Not probably, I definitely will not be hired as a foreign service officer in Canada with Global Affairs Canada because I was not even yet a citizen. Now, as many of you know, the federal government doesn't even really give employment to people that are not permanent residents and or citizens. I mean, they do for temporary residents, but very rarely so. And certain fields, certain roles, never. So this was one of those roles that you had to be a citizen. Even being a permanent resident did not cut it for you. You had to be a citizen. So I understood that from the moment I moved in here and decided to stay in Canada to the point where I would have gotten a job, even if I had all the skills and experience, was still at least 3 years I was looking at, just with the timeline that would match when I would get my citizenship. So I understood that. All right. So when I say that I was looking for a job in my field, I just wanted to set that context because it wasn't that I was looking for a global affairs job as a foreign service officer, because that was not going to happen. I understood that. However, because this is the world of policy and I have been in the world of policy, and if anyone knows anything about the job of a foreign service officer, is that you do a lot. You do a lot of policy work in terms of foreign policy, trade policy, economic policy, because you're sort of like the go-to for pretty much almost all things government related as it pertains to your country's relationship with other countries and or their relationship at multilateral levels with international organizations. Yes, now the policy gig in me is coming out. But and so as far as any other kind of policy work goes, I had the experience, I had the education, but it wasn't coming, and nothing was coming in that area for me. I applied to all levels of government, nothing was happening, right? And so I shifted focus a little bit to I shifted my focus a little bit to just other kinds of positions because I have private sector experience. I could rewrite my resume to position myself for other roles, which I did. And by the time I looked through all of that and I started applying to other positions, customer service, administrative assistant, I still didn't give up on my policy opportunities. I was still applying to those because, like I said, do have the experience. And even though I was, still doing all of that, I started getting calls for interviews with on some of the other positions, but nothing from the government, right? Nothing from the government. It really was at that point I realized that job hunting in Canada isn't just about sending resumes. Like, you really have to understand and know the system. You really have to understand and know the system, right? And so, having done all that, I was interviewing. Like, there were times that I was interviewing 2-3 jobs per day. I am not joking. And sometimes I would have interviews 3 to 4 times a week, right? At the minimum. And that was happening. So I was really excited. Like, okay, I'm getting all these interviews. I'm clearly doing something right with my resume, but I wasn't landing the job. And then so after months of rejection, I mean, there was bills to pay. I made the decision that I wanted to just be here for a little bit and see how things go. So I took up a job at McDonald's. And let me tell you this, that it was a humbling experience. One question I get a lot is that, what would I change if I had to go back on my journey? And I often answer to say I don't think I'll change a thing. Not because yeah, because if I had gotten what I wanted right off the bat, I probably won't be doing what I do right now. Because and I think that even when I was struggling through it, that was where a lot of people were, the people that were around me. I think that was sort of what they found themselves, is no one could really articulate to me how they got to where they were. They knew they did something, and at some point something clicked, something worked, something happened, right? But I found out that no one, like, even when I would ask questions around, okay, I have this interview at this place, what can I expect? No one could really articulate things to me in a way that really positioned me. I mean, people would say things here and there, but it wasn't a lot. And it wasn't because they didn't want to help, but it was because they genuinely didn't really know how to articulate and communicate that to me, right? And so for me, going through that experience, one of the things I started telling myself is to be intentional in figuring out what is working, because I wanted to be able to articulate that to the next person that I met, right? And so, and that's why I often say that I won't change anything, because I went from being a professional to flipping burgers and cleaning tables, and yes, toilets included in the things that I was cleaning, right? But it was such a humbling experience, but it did teach me a lot of lessons. Lesson number one is that sometimes you have to take a step back to move forward, right? This trip gave me my first Canadian experience. And whether or not I like it, there were some transferable skills I took out of it: communication, teamwork, understanding workplace culture. Like, it was different. It was really different, right? And then lesson number two that I'm going to leave you with is that your first job in Canada does not define your career. I mean, today, now, and I don't know if I mentioned this in episode 1, and I'll probably keep reiterating this again, not because I'm trying to toot my own horn or anything like that, but because I really just want to help people understand where I'm at now, what the journey started and where I'm at. And I really want you to be hopeful about wherever you are in your journey, right? And so for me, is that today I've written a book. I still have some books that I'm really hoping to write this year. I now own my own business. I really just do career coaching and career strategizing for people now. And part of that is that I do speaking engagements, and I'm really thriving in that, or at least building that up to thrive. I've worked at all levels of government. I've worked with a regulatory body. I've held different roles that span across the different areas of things that I was doing in my previous role as a foreign service officer. And I'm currently in my PhD program. All things that I said I wanted to do. These are all things that I said that I wanted to do, and I find myself doing that. I've executive produced a short film that won 3 nominations in a film festival. I mentor women, I mentor youths, I mentor teenagers today. like I'm really struggling to think about all the things that I've been doing. I ran for office, right, in my city. These are all things that I've been able to do in this timeline, in this space and time, right? And I've just really explored different aspects of my career and continuing to explore. So really, it is true when I tell you that your first job in Canada does not define, and it doesn't have to define your career outcomes. It doesn't have to define the rest of your career trajectory. Many people might start with survival jobs, but that doesn't mean that you stop there. And people who know me for the longest time, I would say that even though the very first government job I held was still a survival job to me, because what is a survival job? Survival doesn't equal menial. Survival means that you're doing this. It's not really what you wanted, but you're just doing this in the meantime until you get what you want. That's a survival job, right? Although, yes, it does help you survive. And that was what I had, but it was way more than that for me. And so it doesn't have to define your career trajectory. And so, yeah, so here I was now in McDonald's and doing this. What switched and what changed for me in this time was that, I did the McDonald's job for about 5 months and I thought I was done. I was like, okay, this is it. I'm done. I was already pregnant with my son at this time. And I did mention in the first video that something happened that really made me decide that I was going to stay. And here's the start of that story, right? So I was pregnant already with my son. Being in McDonald's was getting harder for me. I had done it for about 5 months. And I'll tell you a very big error I made here. I had done it for about 5 months and I needed to go back home. I'd taken extended leave from my work and I needed to go back home to go do what they call the Foreign Service Academy. And so at this point, I had not resigned from my job. And I was just really thinking about what would this look like for me? Do I want to stay here? Because now I have been here 5 months plus looking for a job, and all I could find was working in McDonald's, which I'd done for about 5 months. I'd been here almost 10 months, and all I could find was working in McDonald's for 5 months of that. And so when I went back to my Foreign Service Academy back home, I really started thinking about, I know I'm going to come back to birth my son. And when I do, would that be it? Or am I going to birth him and then go back and finish my Foreign Service Academy and continue my career in the world of diplomacy, which was what I always wanted, right? And I was just really thinking through all of that and just, going one day at a time. And then came the time that I needed to come back and birth my son. And I came back and I had a near-death experience. That was what switched. That was what switched for me. I had a near-death experience after I had my son. I had to go back to the hospital. If you want to hear the full gist around that, you're going to have to go to my personal channel because that's where I'm going to share that story in detail. This is for the professional piece. But that experience right there really just was the reset that I needed. And I remember being on that hospital bed for the number of days that I was at the hospital and just really thinking through what my life would look like. And when I came out of that hospital, this was now, a couple months, a month or so after having my son, I did not qualify for EI, employment insurance, because I didn't have enough hours worked up before I traveled. And so, rookie mistake, I did not know that I needed up to 600 hours. That was what it was at the time. I didn't know, all right? So, if you're new to Canada and I'm talking to women now, if you're new in Canada and you're planning to work, and you're pregnant or you're planning to be pregnant, please really think it through, because now I'd made a decision I wanted to stay, but we had one income, 2 children, and it wasn't fun. It wasn't fun. But anyway, I decided that, I had to go back to work. So at 2 months, my son being at 2 months old as a baby, I had to go back to work because we needed the extra income, but also because I had finally decided that I'm staying. And in that decision, I also decided what needed to change in my approach, in how I'd approach things before now. And so one of the things that I really sat down to do was build a mental picture, what some might call a vision for myself. So I sat down and I built a career vision for myself. I rewrote my story. It's something that if you followed me for a while or you've worked with me, you've heard me say this over and over, that you should treat your move to Canada as a blank slate. And if you had to rewrite your career story, and quite frankly, your entire story, if you had to rewrite that story, what will it be? And that's exactly what I did. I rewrote my story. All right. I rewrote my story. And within that 2 months of having my son, I went from no longer flipping burgers to now finding myself in my first office, more like a corporate setting position, right? And what was how did I write that vision? I will tell you about that in the next video. But I'll tell you this. And before I leave, I want to just reiterate to you that, you know what, if you're a newcomer, you're struggling to find a job, I see you. I've been there. But here's what I want you to know. Here's what I want you to really take away from this episode is that you are not your survival job. If you find yourself in a situation where you have to take a survival job, you are not your survival job. It doesn't define the rest of your career. It doesn't, and it shouldn't, okay? Number one. Number two, your skills and experiences are valuable, all right? Your skills and your experiences are valuable. Right? There were some things that I started changing over time that I wish that I changed sooner, right? Or that I wish that I identified sooner. And I'll tell you what that is, when I'm talking about what I changed in the next video over time as we go. I don't want to jump the gun, quite frankly, right? And then three, with the right strategy, you will find your way. So make sure that you're finding that right strategy. And that's where sometimes talking to someone, having a mentor, and not just anybody, but somebody who really can communicate and translate things to you. And it's fine if it's from their own experiences, but they better know what they're saying and they better be able to really translate that to you. When in doubt, quite frankly, bite the bullets, pay the costs, and talk to a career coach. Yes, like myself. But talk to a career coach if need be, right? Or talk to someone. And quite frankly, there are a lot of free programs these days that really just sort of handhold you through the process. Okay, so find that right strategy that will work for you. And the fourth thing I'll say too is that sometimes it's a game of time and chance, right? When you've done everything that there is to do, give yourself the time that you need. I get it that sometimes we don't have that time because, you're exchanging whatever value of currency to dollars and it might not be the best. I get that. All right. But sometimes you need to give yourself the time that you need in implementing the strategy that you're implementing. But one thing is sure, I'm here today and I'm happy to tell you about my story, my journey, because it turned out right and it can turn out right for you. One of the reasons that I'm sharing my story is because I'm hoping that whatever you think that I've achieved in 10 years, and I look back, quite frankly, I'm hoping that someone can tell me they achieved all of that in 3 years, in 5 years, less. As long as it doesn't take you the same 10 years to achieve all of that, that's the goal here, and that's why I share. So in the next video, I will tell you how what changed, right? What changed was switched for me on how I was able to identify what I was doing wrong, why I wasn't getting the jobs at the time, even though I was interviewing a lot. And then I will tell you what I did to fix that, because obviously, as we can tell, spoiler alert, the problem was not my resume. And I'll tell you how I fixed that and then landed that first role where I moved from McDonald's to working with Chartered Professional Accountants of Saskatchewan. So all accountants in the house, yay. Yes, I worked with a regulatory body, but no, I am not an accountant. I don't like accounting, but I love accountants. But yes, I will tell you all about that in the next video. All right. If this has been helpful to you, don't forget to like, share, drop a comment, and let's support each other on this journey. If you have been in Canada for a while, even if you just arrived, like what is something you're doing right that you think that someone needs to know? Let's share, let's help one another and make sure that we thrive in this new country, in this country we now call our home. Take care. See you in the next video. Bye.